Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to welcome you all to this Levine Museum of the New South's program, a documentary filmmaking tutorial for our newest Youth Voices initiative, Digital Stories. My name is Patrick Stepp, and I am the programs manager for the Levine Museum of the New South. And I am thrilled to introduce you all to this exciting program. We hope that this filmmaking intro today will give you some info, ideas, and most of all, inspiration. If you didn't know, the Levine Museum of the New South is offering youth a chance to make their voices heard by creating their very own documentary. These documentaries will be displayed at a showcase later this year. If you want more information on our Digital Stories program or find out more on how to send in your very own submission, there will be a link in the chat that you can follow, or you can just visit our website at themuseumoftheNewSouth.org. But now it is time for the main event. Today, we get the chance to learn from the expertise of Frederick Murphy. Frederick Murphy is the founder of History Before Us, a project centered on capturing, preserving, and advocating for influential history. He was raised in Clarksville, Tennessee, and is a graduate of Tennessee State University. His first film, the award-winning The American South as We Know It, explores the lives of survivors of Jim Crow, the courageous individuals who didn't make the headlines. The Levine Museum of the New South is excited to welcome Frederick Murphy.
Hey, thanks. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for that nice warm welcome. All right, you got me on. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. Like it was just mentioned, my name is Frederick Murphy, and I am here in the beautiful Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been here for roughly 12 years. Like earlier mentioned, I was a graduate of Tennessee State University, was raised in Clarksville, Tennessee. And after that, moved to Atlanta, Georgia, to pursue my master's in counseling. So by trade, I am also a professional counselor. Licensed clinical mental health therapist is the new term 2 years ago that it was changed to. Love working in the field of counseling. It provides me so much gratification. But during some parts of my career, I did experience a stint of burnout. And when I did that, I kind of had to practice what I preached and focused on personal care. I had to focus on self-care. And for me, I had a challenge with identifying what that looked like. And then, an epiphany went off, and it was like, let's go back to interviewing people, sitting down at the elders' footsteps and asking them questions about things that they've experienced previously in life. And in doing such, that's when I created History Before Us, which is a multifaceted project. I like to think as it relates to kind of the intricate details of all the things that I've done. And I'll get a little bit into that. Right now, I'm going to share my screen. What we're going to talk about is really bare bones as it relates to the introductory of filmmaking. There's a lot of intricate details that go into this that you will find out throughout your course of becoming filmmakers, and you will be excellent filmmakers at that. But this is going to kind of give us the jump start on what some of this looks like via pre-production, post-production, as well as production. So again, I'm glad that you're here. Follow along. You do have the opportunity at the end to ask some questions. And then at the very end, I will also provide the staff there at the Levine a link to my short documentary that's out right now, making its runs in the film festivals. Sweet Home Alabama, A Chief and His Protege. I've been fortunate enough to win an award not too long ago for the best short, and it will be showcased at the Sidewalk Film Festival in Birmingham, Alabama, coming up here pretty soon. Just actually left the Cobb International Film Festival in Cobb County, Georgia on Sunday. So thank you all for joining today, and we will get started. As you see, again, my name is Frederick Murphy, founder of History Before Us, and this is my social media handle, as well as a website and my email. So let's get started. So this is our objective, is that attendees will develop a critical understanding of the documentary genre. Attendees will develop a general fund of knowledge on how to approach documentary making. So, wanted to kind of talk about a couple other installments that I have been responsible for, and that's the award-winning Sweet Home Alabama Chief and His Protege. So, I released that in the winter of 2021. I've also directed educational films locally here in the state of North Carolina with the Rice Festivals, Black Indians in Sea, Saving Slave Houses. A1 Day One Production is the group that I work with, the Brunswick Art Council, as well as other ones as well. And as you see down here, again, I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor that finds joy in helping people. That's just something that brings me so much joy. Locally, I also serve on the board at the James K. Polk Historic Site in Pineville, North Carolina. I have a board meeting tonight, so I'll be heading there after this. The Slave Dwelling Project, which is in Charleston, South Carolina. Please check that out. And the Tennessee African American Historical Research Group, located in my hometown of Clarksville, Tennessee. So as you see, a lot of things is history based for me. It's just a joy of mine, and I greatly appreciate everything that it brings to me to help me balance out this thing with counseling. So we have to have a working definition of what a documentary is. So a documentary film is non-fictional movie expected to document some part of reality. I don't know about you all, but I live in reality. I know that the metaverse is here and we'll all be functioning in all these different places. But I like reality, and it's fundamental for the motivations behind a guideline on maintaining a historical record. I utilize documentaries a lot when doing research. You have to be a special person who enjoys documentaries. I'm not saying that other genres aren't good, because they definitely are, but you have to be a very intuitive person to be engaged in documentaries, especially the vast variety of documentaries that I've seen over the years. I'm currently judging some submissions in a film festival that's local to the state of North Carolina, and so many eclectic stories. And I know that you all are going to bring that same type of energy to the genre, as well as submit them to film festivals as well. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. So documentaries definitely serve as a guideline for maintaining historical records. So some of the past and current films that I'm part of is The American South as We Know It, The Other Side of the Coin, Race, Generations, and Reconciliation. As you see, these are very varied, based on various topics. Again, we're talking about historical content. We're talking about historical record in which we do now that can be utilized later on in life, for students, for public researchers, just a variety of different individuals that come back to utilize these mediums to delve deeper into problem solving, or just bringing awareness to certain issues. Again, Sweet Home Alabama, Appalachia Soul. Most of that is obviously filmed in Appalachia. Duality, a collection of Afro-Indigenous perspectives. So we're looking at the intersection of people of African descent and Indigenous descent. Silence Voice, Interpreting Sites of Slavery. Lawrence Orr, Chronicle of the Life of Phil. That is actually a local film here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and as well as A Free A, which is a film that's rooted in Selma, Alabama. So these are some of the past and current films that I'm working in, and I just wanted you all to kind of see the diversity in some of these topics that's there. Diversity is good as it relates to filmmaking, because it doesn't pigeonhole you into one specific genre, and that's very, very important, is that you don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed into one genre. Even as one documentary, of course, is a genre, but so focused on one specific topic that people can't see how expansive your skill set and intellect can be. So we're going to move into the stages of filmmaking, and that's the pre-production, that's the shooting, and that's post-production. So pre-production is getting everything all prepared. It's the stuff that's not really fun, just to be honest with you. The research piece can be fun, but the paperwork that goes along with it, the scheduling of certain types of things, the tedious long hours in making sure that you frame things correctly, and that you have you have a map of the direction in which you want the film to go. That stuff, it can be very tedious. It can take a whole lot of time. It probably takes more time than the rest, than shooting and actually post-production as well, but it's very, very essential. And we'll be talking about all three of these phases: pre-production, shooting, and post-production. So in pre-production, it's very important that you tell a story that you care about. Um, there were subjects in school that I just could not stand. Math was one of them. Science was another. But history was something that I really, really gravitated towards. Gym, I know it's pretty easy, but gym was another. I loved being physical. And so we even getting into filmmaking, you really have to look at what it is that you are trying to convey to other individuals, because your energy has to be into it. You have to be vested into the project in which you're going to present, because it, it is very easy for us to kind of, fall back and not put our energy into things that once had us feeling like right here, brought us this much amount of gratification, and then maybe it started to dwindle if our interest started to wane a little bit, right? So we have to make sure that it's something that we are really hardcore about. And so you have to discover it, you have to research it, then you have to document it, and then at the end we have to report it. We can't hold on to all that goodness, right? We are stewards of our community, we're stewards of society, not only in the micro community but also the macro community. And this information that's gathered, it should be shared, and documentary making does just that. So some questions that you have to ask yourself during pre-production is your film unique? How can I make it different? How can I make it different than others? And does it cause people to jump into action and elicit critical thinking? Um, you know, when we talk about being unique, it's very important, right? So think about it. A hamburger, essentially, the basics of a hamburger is you have a bun, you have cheese if a person likes cheese, and you have the meat. You have the, that's the functionality of a burger, right? But depending on where you go, people make things different. And so you add things here, you add there. You can throw jalapenos on there. You can throw onions. You can put mushrooms. You can do all these different things that makes that specific burger unique, right? So McDonald's has the Big Mac, right? No one else has the Big Mac. However, there are other peoples that have something very similar to it, right? But the Big Mac was first. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do as it relates to the film that we're going to project to others? What makes it unique? And I like to just sit down and literally take a piece of paper and just jot it down and research other people's work and look at what it is that they've done, especially if it falls along some of the same topics, and say, okay, well, what can I do to put a spin on it to make it different? And that's very important, especially when you're seeking funders, people to fund your film, grants and things like that. So that's what makes it very important to make sure that yours is unique and very different. And then, does it cause people to jump into action and elicit critical thinking? As documentarians, and I'm going to go ahead and call you all that because that's what you are, that's what you're becoming. That's what you're becoming, and that's what you will be. There's a certain level of responsibility that we have to humanity to report accurate, to report inclusive, to report things that function in the space of advocacy for challenges that we are seeing historically, or even in the present, or potentially in the future, as it relates to um, education, as it relates to finding a way to influence individuals to jump into action and say that this is something that is um, game changing. This is something that can really shift society in a way that uh, cannot be helpful, or that will not be helpful, or something that actually can be helpful. And if my film is a catalyst to that, then I want to make sure that it's done right. I want to make sure that I've given everything that I could to make it just that. And then, the thing is this: whatever it is that we build, hopefully we want somebody to come behind us and make it even better, right? And so all of these things have to be put in consideration during pre-production. Love this quote: mass entertainment in America has been dominated for a long time by the mode of documentary realism. I think that that's very true. So first thing is you have to make a plan and develop a guideline. You have to consider how your film will be structured. Sometimes this picture of this young lady that's on there, My wall does look like that sometimes. You all see what's behind me, which is the bookshelf and everything, but in front of me, I have all these things right in front of me on the wall that identify various different projects that I'm working on and how I need to tie them together and how it's going to be structured. So there's multiple types of documentaries, documentary types. So you have the participatory documentary, and that's the filmmaker appears as an active participant in the film, appears on camera and interacting with the subject matter. So you have to make sure that as a filmmaker, you're also comfortable with being in the film. And not everyone's comfortable being on camera. On a couple of my films, in a couple of my films, I am there, but it's in a very limited role because I like to ask the questions. I like to direct more than being actually in the film. And so you have to make sure that you are honest with yourself as it relates to your involvement in the films, if this is the type that you would like to utilize. Um, and then the second one here, and it's, like it says, it's an essay like narration by the filmmaker. So you're actually speaking to a certain extent, maybe not throughout the whole film, of uh, what the images that are being portrayed in front of the actual viewer. You're providing the description of that. So you have to be very, very descriptive about what it is that you're trying to convey for somebody, because if not, what can happen is people can utilize their own assumptions about what's being presented on the screen. And you, as a filmmaker, want to make sure that you keep people on the same page and that everybody is focusing in the same um, uh, tune, if you will, with the overarching message that you're trying to portray within the body of work that you're presenting to individuals. And then, performative documentary is a unique inventory, a combination of styles used to share a poignant message to the world as to stress on subjects with experience. They often affix personal accounts and experience placed close together with prodigious historical and political concerns. And so when we're looking at those types of things, we're obviously being very definitive about our message. We're being very objective with that. And then there's narrative forms of documentaries and others as well. So ultimately, with this piece, we have to make the decision on, as a filmmaker, what makes us feel good, what makes us feel comfortable. But then after we complete these types of films, we ask ourselves, okay, well, how do I stretch myself to evolve and be very eclectic into other genres within the documentary of the style in which we would like to present to individuals that are viewing the film? And so try not to get too comfortable with just one style. Stretch yourself. We're not made to be monolithic. We're not made to just look at things one way. I believe that all of us have been blessed with multiple different gifts in life, and we should definitely showcase those to the best of our ability. Um, with documentary making, specifically if you're working with a subject or subject matter, um, a very cold approach is reaching out to someone, asking them, do they want to be part of something, and then having them part of something after they have agreed, and then there's no more communication. There's little interaction with that person to keep them informed of what's going on, of what your objectives are, et cetera, et cetera. We have to develop relationships with people, with subjects, if you will, participants, to people name it various different things. Sometimes I use participants. I hardly ever use subject, but sometimes just for general ways of communicating, people say subjects. But for participants in my films, I like to build a relationship with them. If you look up top here, you'll see this woman. Her name is Joycelyn Davis, and I spoke with her over the phone for probably about 8 months before we started filming. And on the bottom is Pastor Derek Tucker. Again, about 8 months with him, so we could develop a genuine friendship before I went in to ask them some very personal questions. So I have a couple of things over here, some bullet points in which I feel is very helpful. Be upfront about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Honesty and clarity will build trust. Also, people like to feel like they've been heard. So if you listen well, you can start off on the right foot. They can vouch for you and introduce you to other key players who might appear in your documentary or facilitate production. So with me talking with her for such a long time, she linked me up with Pastor Tucker because she trusted me. And then Pastor Tucker linked me up with somebody else because I took the time to build that relationship. And that's what I strongly encourage you all to do as well, is be as clear and concise about what your objectives are for this film and also keeping them in the loop. Um, Down here at the bottom, once you meet people, keep communication lines open. This does not mean that you have to be available 24/7, but it's just a good general practice that whenever a participant reaches out to you, that you, of course, return their call and give them as much information without giving them autonomy over the film, giving that type of attention to them. And let people know what you're doing and give them the progress updates as well. That's super duper important to do such. Video consent. This is very important. So before you, well, this kind of is a segue into why you did everything before, because you have to have consent, right? It's one thing for someone to say, hey, can I film you? And then they may say, yeah, sure. But that doesn't mean that you just automatically go and you put put a camera in front of their face with all these lights and possibly a crew and start filming them. There has to be some consent. They have to have knowledge about what, who they're going to be portrayed, how they're going to be portrayed in your project, as well as some say so in what they do want in and what it is that they don't. And that has to be very clear and concise before the record button gets hit. And that is able to be accomplished via a video consent form. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. So it's written permission given by an individual to an entity organization for the use of their name, image, and or interview statements for publication. So this is like the holy grail of the final yes when a person agrees to be into a film, right? So this makes it official. The consent comes without compensation usually, especially where you all are as filmmakers, unless you're paying people already to be in these films. Regardless of the amount of revenue the content generates. Once the document is signed, the entity/organization is not obligated to ask for the individual's approval when using their name, image, or any publication, advertising, or other media enterprises, including the internet. And that's why it's so important to sit down with the subject, with the participant prior to and asking and keeping something around, or your phone as well, to write the notes and say that this is okay and that's not okay. Because with some subject matter, some individuals just may not feel comfortable going there and discussing certain things. And because of that, you have to be wary of that, because you don't want to ask certain question that throws off the whole interview, because that's something that I've seen happen, to where a person is taken aback and is completely surprised that a question was asked, and now they have this camera here and they lose trust. They lose trust literally on campus. I mean, on camera, and it affects how that person governs himself moving forward with future interviews, or if they would even provide references for you for other people that could potentially be in your project. So it's very important that prior to the final agreement, that all of this stuff is ferreted out. And then, of course, depending on where the shoot is, you may need to obtain a location release as well. And that pretty much gives permission for you to shoot at that location. So again, before we get to the part where we actually go into production, as it says, but first, this is an example of video consent and release form. The location release form will look pretty much the exact same. This is something that you can literally pull off of the internet and just curtail it exactly to your project. So you'd want to have your project also labeled on the form so individuals know exactly what it is. And then also maybe a brief synopsis of what the film is, so they'll know that this is for that specific project. So this is an example of what that looks like. If a person is under 18, you would definitely want the parent or the legal guardian for that person to also be involved. You go over this with the individuals while you're there, whether it's over a Zoom call, whether it's face-to-face or over the phone, however you all decide to slice and dice it. It's also good practice for them to have a copy of it as well. So that way, everybody from a legal standpoint has what it is that they need to say that, okay, we have agreed in a partnership for me to be into this film. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean compensation. It all depends on how you set that up. But this makes everything legit. So I want to go into a trailer for the documentary Sweet Home Alabama, A Chief and His Protege. And I was able, of course, to get this film rocking and rolling after I received permission from the two individuals that you saw earlier, Pastor Derek Tucker, as well as Joycelyn Davis. So this is the trailer for it.
In order to know who you are and where you're going, you have to know where you're from.
Your village is being raided. You go through the process and you have no clue where you're going. You have no clue. Being pulled away from your family, not seeing them again, is heartbreaking.
This history has been just covered up all of this time, and it's just coming to light.
It's great to know that my ancestor, Chief Oluwole, collectively with the other enslaved Africans, bought this land. So we've always lived around the plants and the lumber yard. So I know it may sound strange, but it's always been second nature. Growing up, I didn't know any different. You know, I thought all neighborhoods had a chemical plant next to it or a lumber yard.
Joycelyn Davis, even in battling with breast cancer, she never stopped coming to church.
Well, everything that my ancestors went through, the 70-day voyage, going through hurricanes, I knew once I had to go through this test that I could do it because of what they went through.
It's an old song that says, when I can read my title clear for mansions in the sky, I'll bid farewell to every fear and wipe my weeping eye. I would love to see tourists come out here and say, wow, I've been to Africatown, USA. We have something that many communities and many churches don't have. And then once it's completed, I can bid farewell to every fear, wipe my weeping eye.
Right. So that was Sweet Home Alabama, Chief and His Protege, which fortunately I was blessed to win Best Documentary Award for that recently at the Columbus International Film Festival in Columbus, Ohio. And so again, prior to that being able to be completed, I had to have the release form, the consent from those individuals. But again, remember all the work that you put into prior to this moment right here, where it's production time. The long hours of creating a storyboard of where you would like this film to go, the climactic pieces there as well. You know, the moments in which you want individuals to gain insight, the aha moment, right? The moment in which this person can say, or you have the audience say, you know, that resonates with me. And because it does, I'm going to put all my resources or try to utilize my resources in making change in various different things that's identified in the film, or at least to leave your audience with being more knowledgeable than they were before prior to watching your film. So then this is the fun part, the production time. When we get here, production is usually the shortest of the film phases, even though it is essential to the film and where most of the budget is allotted. most of your budget's going to be allotted there in the actual filmmaking, because you, depending on, if I remember correctly, I think you all will be utilizing your cell phones. But later on, when you become even more greater documentarians, you may have a full crew, and because of that, you have to look at um, what it is that you need. You have to do a needs assessment as it relates to if you need somebody who does audio, lighting, grip, all these different things. Director of photography, um, a person that's going to also assist potentially in co-directing. So you always have the ability to scale up. Starting with the cell phone and then being able to scale up is absolutely amazing. But you can also do some great things with just your cell phone. They actually have documentary film festivals solely for individuals who shot the whole film with cell phones, and I've seen some of those, and they're absolutely great. So the production phase is where you capture all the interviews and footage for your video. This is the part where the story begins to come to life. So this is where all that hard work comes in, and you get this bubbly feeling because you're like, all right, like things are rocking and rolling. I'm able to see different scenes and things like that. So I'm really feeling good about the time that I put in prior to. The production phase is also where all the raw materials for your video will be captured. So this is without things being enhanced. This is just flat out the video, what it is that you have in front of you after you hit the stop button from recording. And if you have specific ideas, visions, or visuals that you want to be included in the final product, be sure that you have clearly communicated that with your producer before the end of the production phase. So if you're producing it yourself or you have someone that's producing it for you, you need to be very intentional about all the things that you need from the raw when you're shooting the film in real time, so individuals are able to capture that. So for instance, there's instances to where I may ask individuals, hey, do you have a picture of you as a child? Or do you have a newspaper clipping of this or that? And if so, can you make sure that you bring that to set, or can you have it out when I come to you, because that's something that I would like to capture. And it's very, people's schedules are just crazy nowadays. You have some people that are working 2 jobs. You have some people that are working long hours. You have some people that may have kids. So doing the best that you can to schedule everything and get everything on time and right the first time is going to be very, very important. Because let's just say that a person forgets a scrapbook or something like that of a lot of materials that you need, then you have to reschedule with them and try to get them available again so you can get that footage. And then when you do that, then that may be a month from now. So then you have to, in your files, go back, find where that's supposed to go, make sure it's in the correct spot, which can get very convoluted. And so on the first time, if we make sure that we try our best to do it right, make sure that we send out reminders, be very efficient with our time, as well as very direct and clear with what it is that we need from the participants, then things usually work out for the better and we're able to get all that we need at that moment. So I want to talk about a couple of things that can help enhance film, even with your phone. And that's the discussion of A-roll versus B-roll. I'm going to play this again. So what should a filmmaker do to craft a cinematic masterpiece? A-roll versus B-roll. Consider A-roll as your main production, right? It's the primary footage that you utilize. And then B-roll is the secondary footage. It's what supplements the A-roll. But B-roll is just as important. B-roll is what captures so many of those intimate moments, perhaps, that help explain what it is that the speaker may be saying, or just your overarching mission in conveying what it is that you want in these films. And what I'm going to do is show you all a clip of another film that I'm working on that's titled Duality, a collection of Afro-Indigenous perspectives. And you're going to see pretty much mostly B-roll in this specific clip. And I hope that you enjoy, and we'll discuss how this B-roll helps tremendously in the film.
Black Indian woman. I think about the impact and sacrifices that my ancestors had to make. I think about all those things in the culture, the music, the art, the dance, all those things that they taught me that were oral histories passed down through generations. And I'm very intentional about making sure that I show presence to both of my ancestors, both African and Native American.
So we're sitting here in the historic Franklin Masonic Hall, nationally recognized as a historic landmark by the Department of the Interior through the National Park Service for its involvement, its placement within American Indian removal history.
African Americans were enslaved in the Cherokee Nation, but were also integrated into their kinship structures as well. When we talk about 10,000 people experiencing the Trail of Tears, wintering over at the Ohio River, that number also includes those African American people, whether they're enslaved or part of families.
We used to fight together, and it's not our way to hate our brother. That's not our brother. It's not our way to ostracize people who don't look like what we've been told we're supposed to look like.
Both groups, Native people and enslaved Africans, had one enemy, the same enemy. So that was a natural alliance for us to join forces together.
So as you saw there were multiple different scenes in which a person, you heard the voice, but then you also saw the images or the B-roll footage that assisted with bringing the story home. And so that's the power of B-roll. And I find good common practice is to write down what B-roll that you feel like you're going to need that's going to help enhance your storyline. So that way, once all the A-roll is completed, then you can go back and get that B-roll footage. You're not rushed to say, okay, well, I got to do it at the same time. And if you're on a specific site that there's a time limit that you have, please make sure to allot that you need this certain amount of time to go back and capture that, because it's very, very important. And that avoids the film, that avoids just having talking heads, because sometimes you can lose audience, you can lose their attention if you just have people just talking only without having anything to help supplement that, right? And so B-roll provides context. It supports your video's narrative and story. B-roll cutaway shots should reinforce your overarching theme, message, and story. And then the types of B-roll footage, so there's archival footage, there's dramatic reenactment. So if you got some friends that you would like to reenact something that's identified in the A-roll, then that's absolutely perfect. You can use stock photos. However, that can get very, very expensive. Some of the stock photos that I've used in previous films were like $75 just for the photo. And some of the B-roll archival footage can cost up to, I mean, we're talking hundreds of dollars. So whatever you're able to get right there on site is very, very important, or whatever it is that your participants are able to bring to you. And then storytelling, of course, also is B-roll as well. This is very important and something that I've had to learn the hard way, and that is external hard drive. Super duper important that you have external hard drives. I have one right here, and this is 2 terabytes, and I have another one that is 4 terabytes, and I have another one that's 12 terabytes. And that is to make sure that we're able to back up everything that you film. And it's also good to have an extra one just in case you have to transfer footage from you to another person, whether it's an editor or if it's a fellow classmate that's working on a project and they may need the footage as well, especially if you all from an editing standpoint are collaborating and doing such. So it's a huge investment. Trust me, I know my pockets feel it. However, it is essential in making sure that things don't get lost. There are also cloud-based there's cloud-based services that also can store your footage. So you just kind of have to gauge what's best for you and the other people that you may be working with. as well as how easily accessible it is once it's needed. So please, please make sure to get you a solid external hard drive, because the worst thing, and I've had to experience it, is to film something and then you lose access to it. So very, very important. And that was my own fault, because it was told to me that this is something that I need to do over and over again. I just didn't do it fast enough. So just an FYI. So post-production, this is the stage after production when the film is wrapped up, and editing of the visual, audio, and all the other fun things that you're going to add to the film, whether it's graphics, animation, etc., etc. It's put in. Post-production process should be highly collaborative. Show people some of your raw footage. Don't spread it across to everybody, because you don't want to get so many opinions that it knocks you off of your pivot to where your original objection. In which your original objective. Sorry, too many O's. Is compromised because you have so many people that are lending their opinion about the project. And again, it's not that you safeguard it and keep it solely for yourself, but share it with a couple of true confidants that can give you some very, very good sound advice. Even another fellow seasoned filmmaker that can say, hey, you may want to place this here, or you may want to remove that, or you may want to review and see if this piece is even needed. And then also sometimes realize that you may interview, let's just say 20 people, if it's a person that you're interviewing, and not everyone makes it. It may just be 10 solid interviews, or the other ones, it just doesn't necessarily weave into the final product in which you're trying to present. So just keep that in mind when you are in post-production, is that everybody that you filmed and everything that you filmed may not necessarily stay, but it's also good to keep that on the back burner, because you never know when you may have to tie it into this project or another project, especially if you're doing series, in which series are things, docu-series and TV series are things that are really have created a mainstay in film. So then you have to ask yourself, where would you like your stuff screened after you finish? Where would you like your work screened? So you have film festivals, you have libraries, local organizations, advocacy groups, schools, religious spaces, online streaming, and museums. And this is always the fun part. Now, film festivals cost. However, if you are a student, which you all are, oftentimes fees get waived, or it's a very minimum amount that you will have to pay. Libraries, I have found that pairing your screening of the film that you all will produce with potential presentation, it gives people like that 2-for-1. So people always like to get more, but it may guarantee your foot in the door, because they're not only leaving with the visual, but they're also actually getting some real-time education from the person who's presenting the Q&A. I'm sorry, that's presenting the film, that has a level of expertise in it. And that is something that I strongly encourage everyone to do, is especially when you're in the local circuit, is to create something that accompanies your film. And again, it doesn't have to be a long presentation. It could just be like a 10-minute presentation on whatever the issue is. Let's just say it's something focused on climate control. Okay, we'll compile something together, a presentation that goes along with the Q&A. With your screening. And I keep saying Q&A because usually after the screenings comes along the Q&A. But this gives people this added, it persuades them to say, okay, you know what? We're not just getting a film screen here and people are going home. This person's actually really vested in this and wants to provide education for us as well. And that can be utilized in most of these different entities, advocacy groups, schools, religious spaces, museums, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's something for you all to really think about, right? Like how far do you want to take your filmmaking? What level do you want to take it to? And, Film Freeway is one of the resources that you can utilize to submit your films. Again, that's Film Freeway, and a really good repository of various different film festivals, not only here in the United States and in North America, but also internationally as well. And so after you finish the production, the production, as well as post-production, it's time for you to enjoy the fruits of your labor. while changing the world in the process. So you have to enjoy that when you have your premieres. And I think that sometime in December, we'll be watching you all's finished projects rather. And I definitely look forward to doing such, sitting down and meeting some of you all and looking at the films that you've been able to produce. And hopefully something that you gathered today would help you with that. Again, this is something that we're talking about now. The information that we discussed today is really bare bones. It's just a smidget of some of the stuff that you'll learn throughout this whole process of becoming documentarians, but you'll enjoy every step of it. So I thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you so much, Frederick. That was very enlightening. So now we're going to open it up for some questions. So if any of our viewers have any questions for Frederick, please feel free to put those in the comments or in the chat below, and we'll be happy to answer them. To kick us off, I have a question for you. So as they begin their journey into becoming documentarians, for our youth filmmakers, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for them, and maybe what should they look out for as they're stepping into this for the very first time?
I think just how eclectic their ideas are. It's very hard to kind of nail things down to be this when we really want it to be this initially when we start off, because you all have so many great ideas, and I get it. Some of my work has stemmed from the ideas that a younger person has put in. Right, has had some interest in, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, boom, boom, like that's great. And so even me, when I first started in filmmaking, I wanted to add this, that, all these things into this pot of gumbo. But I had to recognize that there's only a few ingredients that I could put in there, because sometimes you can really get lost when you try to be so expansive with your films initially. And so I think that is one of the things that we have to really be careful with, is making sure that you stay the course as it relates to what it is that you're trying to convey to the audience. So that's one of the things that I would definitely say to be careful of.
Great. And since they are beginner filmmakers, and they have all this they're thinking of, right? Do you have any maybe resources or tips for like filming with your cell phone, or like maybe a really easy, simple editing style or tip that you might think they could use?
Yeah, so it really just depends on what platform from an editing standpoint that they're going to utilize. iPhone has one that's already built in, of course, and that's iMovie. And there's some others as well. Adobe Premiere is another, and if you're a student, you get that at a discounted rate. And I strongly encourage individuals to utilize YouTube as tutorials on how to do. I still use YouTube in conjunction with the editing crew that I work with, because there's always something new that comes out all the time with editing, and utilizing YouTube as well as the devices that you have handheld can assist you with that tremendously. And so those are a couple of just quick, easy things. I mean, there's all kind of others. There's Final Cut Pro and DaVinci, and so, but that's for individuals that are utilizing things outside of usually your cell phone, right? You want to make this simple, being that you all are first time. So if you're shooting with an iPhone, iMovie, if you're using Android, I don't know if there's anything in particular that they have on their built within their cell phones. They may, I'm not sure. But maybe Adobe would be good for that.
All right, so it looks we got a question. I'm going to pop it up here on the screen for you.
Yeah, so how do you narrow down an idea to make the film stays short in 2 to 3 minutes? I think that it is very important to really put things in perspective as the objective in which you're trying to portray, right? And in order to do that, you're going to have these sticky notes everywhere, or use your phone to say that what is it will catch the eye of the viewer. What is it that's going to be so impactful within this 2 to 3 minutes that a person's going to remember that even when they leave here. And make sure that your build up leading up to that is focused towards that upward trajectory to getting people to that point. Once you're able to do that, then it's easier to bring them back down, right? It may be hard to get up, but it's easier to bring them back down after you've captured that. And that can be captured in short films within 2 to 3 minutes. Silent films, right? There's so many different ways in which individuals can do this. And so I think keeping that at the forefront as it relates to that short time period in which you're trying to portray this message to the audience, if you utilize that, then I think that would help. I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, great. So here's another one for you. I know we talked about today about how important uniqueness can be to when you're creating a film, right? So for our first-time filmmakers, I think one of the most difficult things can be finding that inspiration or finding that uniqueness in their storytelling. So for those who might be hitting a creative wall, so to speak, having trouble finding that sort of spark, do you have any tips or any like rituals you do to get the juices flowing?
Yeah, I try to go to my happy place, and my happy place is usually coffee shops. So I go there, I get away from the family. I'm just zoned in on just me. I'm able to focus on me. I cut my cell phone off. I literally zone out to where I can solely focus on what's in front of me. So I would say definitely go to a space to where you're the most productive. Usually doing this after a good night's sleep is very important. And then also, like sometimes when we have a certain vision for a film, we have to also look at what's within inside the vision that I have that can create, that highlights the multitude of reference points in this one film, right? So like with Sweet Home Alabama, there's a lot of different components in that film. It was originally focused on identifying her enslaved ancestor who came over illegally after the illegal slave trade. But then there's this environmental component in it. As you saw, she said that she thought it was pretty normal for neighborhoods to have factories in it. And then she's also a survivor of cancer as well, right? And so we have to look at the different multitudes that our original idea kind of started with and see how all of these other things get woven into what we thought was just monolithic potentially in this, and say, okay, well, this can be expansive in this regard, which can provide me a larger audience and which can also help make it a little bit easier for me to add other components that are focused on these specific things that can enhance things. So when I do get to the point where I may get stuck, writer's block or what have you, you can say, oh, well, let me lean a little bit closer to this end versus this end, and then tie it all together, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great. Well, thank you so much, Frederick. That was absolutely incredible. A absolute joy to watch and listen to you. And thank you to everyone who has joined us here today, and even to those who may be watching this later. If there's anything you've missed, or if you just want to come back and watch this program again, this will be available on our website and on our YouTube page for your reference. So please share this with your friends, your family, or anyone you know who may be interested in filmmaking or participating in our program here at the Levine Museum. The deadline for our digital story submissions is September 16th of this year, and we would love to see your videos. So please consider submitting and participating. We would love to have you. Do you have anything else, Frederick, that you want to add?
Yeah, I do. I want individuals that did take the time to be with us today. I think that you all potentially are going to set up something to where we can capture some emails. And when we do, what I'll do is I will send a link to Sweet Home Alabama, Achieve Finished Protege. That's my latest short, as well as a password for you to be able to view it. You won't be able to download it, but you will be able to view it, and it'll be available for a week because it is currently on the film festival run. I can't just kind of have it out there right now. But I would love to gift you all who were in attendance today or who view it later until you all create a timeline in which you cut off. email submissions, I would love to gift you all with that. So I thank you all for attending today, and I appreciate you. And hopefully something that I lent today it's going to be helpful for you all. So that's what I got. I appreciate you all.
That's so awesome. Again, thank you, Frederick, so much. And thank you to everyone who is watching. And I will see you next time. Happy filmmaking.
Happy filmmaking.